Hello and welcome back, Super Games Bros here, and today we'll be taking a look at the Retroid Pocket 3. The version I have here is the 3GB model, but there is a 2GB model as well, and I chose the SNES inspired color option, but over on their website they do have several other color options, including orange, even though it kind of looks like yellow, black. They have a GameCube inspired one with indigo and white. I prefer the Super Nintendo option. Now, if you're going to buy this, it does ship from China, and it should be noted that some of these color options are a bit more in demand than others, so you might actually wait a little bit longer if you choose the SNES style like I did. But if you went with, say, a black color option or something else, you may actually get the product sooner. They have a delivery dashboard on their website, and you can see just how long it's going to be before it even ships. Taking a look at the screen, it has a 4.7 16:9 IPS display that I think actually looks really good for these retro games. Has a very solid color saturation, and it just really pops on a lot of these older systems. So taking a look at the specs, we've got a Unisoc Tiger 310 AX75 processor running at 2 GHz. Again, you've got that 2 to 3 GB RAM option, and it does come with 32 gigs on board, and it has a micro SD card slot. It has a 4,000 milliamp battery, and it runs Android 11, and then it'll cost you around $119 if you want the 2 GB model, $129 for the 3 GB model, which is actually the version I would recommend. Just go spend the extra $10 and get a little bit more power. Now, it comes loaded with RetroArch, which works really well for the lower end systems, and you can install your own through the Google Play Store if you'd like, which I did for some of the higher end systems like Dreamcast using the Redream emulator and PSP using the PSPP emulator. Of course, the lower end systems run in a 4:3 aspect ratio, so you will have black borders, but through RetroArch, you can install bezels if you want. I don't particularly mind them. You do also have the option to stretch the image, which I do on Gameboy Advance, and I think it works really well since it's a 3:2 image. And even some of the retro games look not bad in a stretched image if you want to take full advantage of that full screen. N64 runs well with the Mupen 64 emulator, but this in Dreamcast is where I feel like you start to run into issues, maybe not with the software side, but maybe the hardware side, in that the system, while it does feel really good and premium in my hands, the size of the controller being so close with the D-pad and the analog stick sometimes can feel a bit cramped. Of course, this could be just because I have maybe larger hands, especially with the N64 using that sort of one analog stick. It does sometimes to me feel a little bit awkward or sort of cramped, but it's also depending on which game you're playing, and not every game for these systems were the controls that great in the first place. I'm sure there are some PlayStation 1 games where that could be an issue as well, but that's more on the games than the system itself. The buttons and D-pad I very much like. Even the analog sticks feel like Joy-Cons, but they do feel premium. Everything about this device from top to bottom is a very good quality feel to it. It's got the volume rocker on the side, has start and select at the top, which definitely took a little bit to get used to because this feels so much like the Switch Lite or, you know, a Nintendo Switch. The Switch has the volume on the top, so that definitely took a little bit to get used to. Once you get it going, it's not too bad. You've got the home button on the side of the system, and then you have it's just titled 1 button at the top, but it's your power button. Underneath, you've got 2 speakers, which very good audio quality coming out of this. I found the audio, even playing it at max, it doesn't feel like it's very distorted or anything. I was actually really surprised at just how good these speakers were. You've got an SD card slot underneath, your USB-C charger, and a headphone jack. And at the top, you have a micro HDMI out. On the back of the console, you've got a heat vent as well as some more speaker room. I really like the triggers on this, especially the R2 and L2. On the top, you just have sort of the bumpers, but the triggers feel very good in your hands. And playing like PSP games or PS1 games, they just come across very well, and it feels very accurate to the real thing. So at the end of the day, who is this system for? Well, with its price point, you kind of find yourself in a bit of a conundrum. For me, I'll primarily be using this device for PSP and Game Boy Advance because of the screen dimension. And it just runs PlayStation Portable so well and Game Boy Advance. And growing up, I didn't really play a lot of handheld games, so that's just where I'm primarily going to be focused with this, but everything up to PSP, it runs very well. Now, if you want something that has a very good 4:3 screen and you don't want, say, those black bars on the side, There are other options like the excellent Mayu Mini, especially if you're just looking for like Super Nintendo, Genesis, Game Boy, stuff like that. Now, if you want something a bit more powerful to say run PS2 and GameCube games, this is where you start to run into that $200 range, like the Ambernic RG552, and you should be looking at items like the Odom Lite or the Odom Pro, but those are definitely a bit bigger in their size. Then you sort of get into that next range where you're looking, you would be looking at potentially a Nintendo Switch or a Steam Deck. So for the price point of this and its size at around $120, for me, it's absolutely perfect, and I would definitely give it a buy.